Okay, on to the sleeves. So this bodice is actually too wide for me. I'm going to probably end up taking 2 of the rows out of my side panels on each side in order to make it just a bit snugger. I also have the split in the back, which means that I have a bit more space to work with, so I'm thinking of adding buttons. That'll give me some slight overlap here, but I will be probably adding button loops by just chaining from down one side and then hand sewing buttons on the cluster spaces. But that is just me. But instead of fixing my mistake right now, I'm just gonna show you how to make the sleeves. So once you've gotten your bodice or your bib done, and then you've added your side panels, done all of your measurements, tried it on, you feel pretty good about where everything is, then we'll move on to the sleeves. So the sleeves, we'll do just a few rows of granny square stitches in the round, and then we'll be adding on a corner to the bottom of it, or the underside of the arm, in order to create that flare. So if you wanted, you could stop there after you added the sleeves and just have a bodice. You could create a 2-piece by making a skirt, or you can continue on and make the dress. If you do the bib with a split, then maybe it's a vest instead of a top. Again, I'm hoping this is very modular and easy to manipulate for whatever purposes you have in mind. So I have cut none of these threads so I can unravel them and fix later. So I'm going to attach my sleeve in this sort of bottom corner here. I'm going to start with this space. I've done my slip stitch, or I've done my my slip stitch, so I'm going to chain 2 and add a granny cluster here. Alright, looks like I did about 5 or so rows. And one modification we're going to make is to undo all of this and instead work 2 double crochets and 2 double crochets with no space in between. This acts sort of like a decrease on this corner, giving us, because we have so much space to work with, this smooths out this corner just a little bit, like it did on the original dress that I made. I don't know why I initially did that, so if you don't want to undo what you just did, you don't have to. It's not that big of a deal. So now I'm at my corner once again. So the reason that I did the 2 double crochets in each of these holes was so that when I got to this one, instead of having to try and figure out, do I put a cluster here and then a cluster down here, but what about this space up here? In order to bring them together, I just did 2 double crochets in each of these stitches. So this one, right before I get to this hole, which is the last stitch on this row, I just did 2 and then 2 together. So that's why I did that. I didn't remember until I had gotten here. That way this hole isn't so big, and you don't have a chain in between the two of them, so it sort of pulls them together, creating one granny cluster. Now, when we get to the next row, we will just put, well, we'll figure that out in a second. So, keep going until you get to the end of the row. Keep. And connect the 2. So we'll chain 2, and then turn the work so that we can work into the space that we just created. So 2 double crochets go into that very first space. Chain 1, 2 double crochets go into the next space. And 1 cluster goes into this space. Chain 1, and when you get to this split of 2 double crochets, instead of crocheting into this one, we're going to skip it and crochet into this one. We're going to treat these 2 separate clusters as if they're one, and we could pull them together, so we're just going to ignore it. And then we'll do the same thing when we get to the other one. So if you are doing multiple colors, you can work back and forth between the 2 sleeves. If you're worried about sort of running out of one color and you want to make sure that they're even, that was how I did my first dress. When I was doing the bodice, after I'd done the bodice and I was working on the sleeves, I wanted to make sure that my sleeves and my skirt followed the same pattern. So if I did 2 sleeves in pink, or 2 rows in pink, I would do 2 rows in pink on one sleeve, the other sleeve, and then the skirt, and I built them out that way. So now we're back at our 2 clusters of 2 double crochets. We're just going to skip those, or skip this hole in the center, I've done my chain 1, I'm simply going to connect my rows together. So for the first 2 rows, it should look like that. So we'll do a few more. If you want to start on the increases early, by all means, skip ahead to whatever time marker that ends up being, and you can immediately start increasing, or you can just do a few rows. I mean, it's entirely up to you. Do whatever feels good, but your sleeve will get very, very big and you don't have to increase at all. So I've turned my work, chain 2, and into that first space I've done my first cluster, and then I'll continue all the way around. So I wouldn't recommend increasing immediately on the sleeve, just because that first row and the second row are a bit fiddly, but this third row here, if you wanted to, you could find the center bottom and then started with your crochet corner. So that's also an option, but this way sort of flutes the sleeve very nicely. So again, I'm going to do 5 rows. Working back and forth. And so for me, with the way that the top is coming along now, I end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 clusters to start my armhole. Obviously that will be affected by how wide your side panel is and how large your bib portion is. So instead of doing the 5 stitches that I would have done to create my sleeve, because that will just take up too much of your precious time, I am going to show you how to start the increases now, and then I'll do that for a few rows, and that will give you a pretty good idea of how to keep going on the sleeves. So I am turning my work, and I'm just going to sort of flatten this out. I'm looking for sort of a center hole to crochet into. So if I flatten out my sleeve here, and I look at my side panel, I'm gonna place my corner right here. It doesn't have to be perfectly in the center at the sort of underside of the sleeve. It can just be somewhere down at the bottom. And you can always adjust as you're moving if it feels like your corner is twisting or listing to one side. So, I've turned my work, chain 2, 2 double crochets go into this first space, chain 1, and then I'm going to add my corner. And this is just like every other corner we have done so far on this project. I've done my first 3, I'll chain 2, and then I will add my second cluster. And then chain 1 and keep going all the way around. So then I'm at the end of my row, I will connect my 2 pieces. And so you'll end up with this little peak at the bottom of the sleeve. And this is where the increases come from, and so it creates that flare, flute, bell shape of the sleeve without you having to do any actual work to increase. So on its side, if I flatten it out again, you'll see that it doesn't quite look like much just yet. I'll do another row, but you can see that this is where the weight of the sleeve is going to start pulling down. It comes away from the body and then it slowly starts to get bigger. So, working on my next turn, I'll crochet back the way I came. And if you find that that peak isn't quite going where you want it to go when you're doing the next round, you can just change the position of the corner by placing it somewhere more central. And then staying in that corner, creating your corners in that corner as you make it bigger. So say for the first row, it's a little to the left or a little to the right. You can, on the next row around, place that corner anywhere you need it to go. especially if you end up sort of with an even number of stitches, or maybe there's a stitch in the way. Like mine probably isn't perfectly center, but you want to catch it early enough on so that way you can correct it, and the rest of your corners will just create a straight line rather than sort of zigzagging its way down the arm. Not that that's that big of a deal. So say I've gotten to my corner and it looks like this is pretty even, but if it weren't, say it were one space over here, I can just add a corner right before it. So if I wanted to, instead of placing my next corner in the corner, so placing it here, I would just do the same thing here. 2 clusters, so cluster, chain 2, cluster in this space rather than in this space. And that will help correct the direction of your peak. But for now, for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to put my corner in the corner. And close. So that way, when we get here, so it immediately starts to flute. This is the peak. I can sort of pull that, and you can see that bell is really gonna go a very long way. If you get to a point where your bell is big enough and you no longer want it to keep growing, instead of putting a corner there,